Genetics is a scientific study of heredity. Heredity is a passing on of traits to the offspring of traits, any characteristic that can be passed on genetically.
Our study of genetics began in the 19th century with an Austrian monk whose work was kind of rudimentary. He had a fondness for flowers and specifically the garden pea, and what Gregor Mendel coined a factor we now call a gene. Peas make a good source for the study of genetics, and it goes well beyond their flowering aesthetics. Their seeds are readily available, they're easily grown, they make a lot of offspring and have 7 traits, each with only 2 forms. Since plants began as purebreds, which means they always have the same traits as the parent plants from which the babies came. But then he made some hybrids by cross-pollinating purebreeds, plants with different forms of the same trait like round or wrinkled seeds. The first 2 plants crossed he called the parent generation. He found that it was easy to do by controlling the pollination. The first filial generation Mendel expected to be mixed, but when he studied the F1 plants his hypothesis got nixed. Because all he saw were round seeds, not a single one was wrinkled. I bet he sat for a moment thinking with his forehead crinkled. So he let the F1 plants self-pollinate to make the next generation, and when these plants came up, Mendel was rewarded for his patience. The F2 plants showed differences, much to Mendel's good fortune, and after counting different traits he found the same proportions, 75% of one form and 25% of the other, the secrets of heredity he was beginning to uncover.
Genetics is a scientific study of heredity. Heredity is a passing on of traits to the offspring of traits, any characteristic that can be passed on genetically.
Mendel's work with his pea plants went on for some time. Through careful observation and by recording what he'd find, he was able to see patterns and to start looking for a cause. From his work with pea plants, Mendel gave us 3 genetic laws. To understand his laws, you've got to understand meiosis. If you've forgotten how meiosis works, it'll be hard to know this. A little memory jog. There's no time for a full summation. It's the type of division that mixes genetic information in the process of gamete formation. Remember, an allele is just one form of a trait. You get one from your mom and one from your dad when the zygote they create. So the law of segregation says when it's time to make sex cells, half the gametes get one type, the other half gets the other allele. The proportions of the F2 offspring support the law of dominance. It seems that some alleles prevent the others from being expressed. So if both alleles are present, only the dominant one is shown. Recessive alleles are only observed if the dominant one is gone. The last law is known as independent assortment. It's yet another reason for the variety in the family portrait. During meiosis, different alleles segregate independently, which mixes up the parents' genes and designs gametes uniquely. Mendel's 3 laws form the basis of modern genetics, and an understanding of meiosis will really help you get this. We've come a long way since this 19th century fella got to working with his pea plants and their seeds of green and yellow.
Genetics is a scientific study of heredity. Heredity is a passing on of traits to the offspring of traits, any characteristic that can be passed on genetically.
One more important point before we work on vocabulary. The Punnett Squares is what we use to predict genetic probability. The female gametes go on the left side, the male gametes go on top. Beside the female alleles right, the male alleles you drop. When you're done, the squares will show you the possible offspring. As you can see, it's so easy to fill out the whole thing. When we're only crossing one trait, we call it monohybrid, but if you get a bit excited and cross 2 traits, that's dihybrid. The words we will be using while we're working with genetics may sound a little weird, but they're not that complicated. The actual genetic makeup of an organism is its genotype, whereas the observed physical trait is known as the phenotype. Hetero means different, homo means the same. So when these roots are present, you know a bit about what's in that name. Purebreeds have the same allele, so we call them homozygous, but hybrids have 2 different alleles, so they're called heterozygous. And of course there are the old words like haploid, diploid, and zygote, and crossing over in tetrads and the other words from your notes. So you've learned a bit about genetics, but there's so much more to go. This introduction will get you started, but there's so much more to know, like non-Mendelian inheritance and multiple alleles, polygenic inheritance, and other cool things still.
Genetics is a scientific study of heredity. Heredity is a passing on of traits to the offspring of traits, any characteristic that can be passed on genetically.